Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin spoke at length with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell about the final details for a new COVID relief package. Republicans are growing concerned over a ballooning stimulus package that feels, quote, imminent. The White House's Supreme Court nomination ceremony on Saturday is being called by some Trump's Red Wedding as more individuals from the event test positive. Others say this is extreme, and we can't yet pin these cases on Saturday's nomination ceremony, despite the fact that many high-level Republicans who are now COVID positive attended the event and were shown hugging and speaking in close quarters with other individuals at the White House. Trump's doctors gave conflicting reports this morning on his COVID prognosis. Today is 1 month from Election Day. By the way, the amazing courses down below on money, stocks, and real estate and YouTube have just been updated with some new lectures, and we're also now reintroducing the Lowe's for Pros discount bonus, which is an amazing way to save a lot of money at Lowe's. On to the news. Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin's phone call with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell seemed to focus on the final details of state and local government funding, which is one of the last remaining and very large hurdles. Right now, we are at $417 billion for a Democratic ask for state and local government funding, and Republicans are willing to give $250 billion. Potentially, Jerome Powell is the person mediating the gap and trying to come up with a solution. This is very good progress, and it's also likely that Jerome Powell spoke to Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi about the inclusion in the updated HEROES Act to allow regular individuals and small businesses and self-employed people access to the Main Street lending program. Many are anxiously standing by for more details on this loan program, though it's unlikely to be as good as the PPP program. Further, talks between Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin are continuing over this weekend, and current staff reports are that Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin are trading documents and sample language for a future bill, which, remember, after we strike a verbal deal on a bill, we actually have to submit an actual written bill. And right now, they're talking about the verbiage of that bill, which means it sounds like they're burning both ends of the candle to get a deal done. Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin also told airlines, give us until Monday to come up with something. Although, honestly, at this point, it feels like we're watching a snail's race as they run a mile during high school PE, and it's taking very long. Senate Republicans are worried that Mnuchin is going to roll over and allow checks to go to undocumented workers with ITIN numbers. That is, stimulus checks to go to potentially illegal individuals within the country. Remember, ITIN numbers are like Social Security numbers in that they let you pay taxes and they document your tax records. This shows that Republicans are beginning to grow anxious that Mnuchin is about to strike a larger than expected deal with Pelosi. At the same time, Mitch McConnell's majority in the Senate is shrinking as 3 Senate Republicans are now COVID positive. Also, the Senate does not have a remote voting plan. This is different from what the House of Representatives have. This means right now, Democrats have slightly more control than they've previously had in the Senate, though the Senate is still controlled by a majority of Republicans. Remember, the leftover discussions on the current state of the stimulus package also relate to how much money schools should get, how much money we should be paying for unemployment, whether $400 or $600 per week, and the time frame for those payments. Democrats want 5 weeks more than Republicans want, and how much money should go to state and local governments. Yesterday, we did the math, and we found that we're only $362 billion apart from a deal. Yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that there would be no changes to the Senate's schedule, despite the fact that 3 Republican members are now COVID positive. Today, he changed his mind. Floor activity has been postponed through October 19th. Committee meetings will operate in a hybrid fashion, both virtual and physical. This is being done to prevent delays for the confirmation hearing for Judge Barrett. On unemployment, the majority of massive layoffs that happened at the end of September and the first day of October at companies like Disney, Allstate, and the airlines, which together furloughed over 60,000 workers in just the last week, were totally missed in the last unemployment report. That's because the last unemployment report was from data collected between September 6th and September 12th, which leaves us waiting until the next unemployment report to know what these layoffs have truly done to the unemployment rate. Unfortunately, the next unemployment report will not come out until November 6th, which is 3 days after the election. On Donald Trump, folks, I want you to see how real information travels around the press, because you might wonder, why is it that reporters get more information than we actually hear from staff on TV? Well, we now have a little bit of insight on something that was actually picked up on camera. Probably shouldn't have been, but this is from this morning. This is White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows talking with a group of reporters, and just take a listen to what he says here.
What was the third? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10. Okay, so who...
Obviously, the cameras are still rolling, so if we can go off the record with some of y'all and get away from the cameras,
Sure.
I'd be glad to.
Obviously, the cameras are still rolling, and if we could go off record with y'all, then we can keep discussing. This is interesting, so keep in mind, there's a lot that actually happens behind closed doors that we don't necessarily see. On Donald Trump, the Associated Press is now reporting that Trump received supplemental oxygen Friday morning before he walked onto Marine One to travel to Walter Reed's Medical Center. This also comes after doctors for Donald Trump handled questions from reporters not in necessarily the best way. Doctors suggested that Donald Trump was in good spirits and his condition was improving, but they heavily dodged questions as to whether or not Trump was receiving oxygen or when he had last received oxygen. Doctors also said Trump was diagnosed 72 hours ago, which would mean mid-Wednesday, but we did not hear that Trump was COVID positive until 12:54 a.m. Friday morning. Doctors are now clarifying that when they said 72 hours, they meant Thursday was day 1, Friday was day 2, and Saturday today is day 3. Some are now suspecting that Trump may have had an initial COVID positive test on Wednesday or early Thursday, and that maybe they waited to let everybody know until they got a much more detailed lab-oriented test and confirmation test in a day or 2 day and a half later. Trump doctors are most concerned about Donald Trump's potential inflammatory response, which we might see between day 7 and day 10. This means the most crucial period is likely to be between Wednesday and next Sunday, and that's an approximate range, in that range. Also, literally 10 minutes after Trump's doctors said Donald Trump was fine, reporters were told privately that Trump's condition was, quote, very concerning prior to going to the hospital, though that report remains unconfirmed. Further, medical experts are also suggesting that Trump likely went to Walter Reed's Medical Center early because that way he could show that he was able to walk and get to Marine One and get to the hospital on his own accord. This certainly beats the image of President Trump being wheeled out of the White House if his condition deteriorated and he went to the hospital later. Trump has 3 known risk factors: being male, being 74, and having a BMI of over 30. His BMI, body mass index, is 30.5. The CDC cites a lower death rate for 74-year-olds than Harvard and other researchers do. The CDC cites that there is a 3% chance of death for a 74-year-old male and a 10 to 15% chance of severe illness. However, the CDC's rate does not include having a BMI over 30 in that percentage. Regarding Joe Biden, medical researchers fear that Biden won't know that he's COVID negative with certainty for at least another week. And that's because COVID tests have a high rate of false negatives. In fact, based on this research from MIT, these are the odds of having a negative test even though you have COVID. 1 day after exposure, you are 100% likely to have a negative test even though you actually have COVID. 4 days after exposure, you're 67% likely to have a negative test, even if you are COVID positive. The day you have symptoms, you are still 38% likely to have a negative test, even though you're positive. And 3 days after you have symptoms, you're still likely with a 20% chance to get a negative test, even if positive. Now, MIT does say that there are better tests that will tell you 5 days after you've been exposed with a 95% certainty whether you are negative or positive. However, other research has indicated that sure, you could get to that 5% false negative rate in a lab, but once you start taking these tests in the field, you're still likely to have a false negative rate of 5 to 30% because of the differences in the ways people are actually collecting the sample data. Bottom line, the COVID tests kind of suck right now. You could literally be COVID positive and not know it even though you're testing and even though you're having symptoms. And this could have been the Achilles heel for Donald Trump. But not only that, it doesn't bode well for, well, the reality that we're in. We're expecting, okay, once we can get tests everywhere, we can go back on airplanes, we can go back in schools. Well, if you have high false negative rates, then that's a big problem. And I know a lot of you don't like the New York Times, but this is a really neat graphic. It's very simple, but this is something that they put together, and it gives us a really good idea of when you're infectious versus when you actually have symptoms. And you can see here that you're infectious much before you actually start exhibiting symptoms, but you actually won't show a positive test until probably 1 to 3 days into you actually having symptoms. So you have this nightmare of a disease, essentially. Additionally, I put together a chart of everybody who's now positive who went to the White House Supreme Court nomination ceremony. Here it is. This is the chart. We have Kellyanne Conway, who retired but still went to the event and is now positive. We have Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey and now Donald Trump's debate coach. Bill Stepien, he is Donald Trump's campaign manager and has flu-like symptoms. We have Senators Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Mike Lee of Utah, who is also on the Judiciary Committee, Tom Tillis, who's also on the Judiciary Committee. These individuals, Lee and Tillis, also had multiple party meetings with other senators last week. 3 White House journalists tested positive. Hope Hicks, Melania, Donald Trump all tested positive. Ronna McDaniel has tested positive. She is the director of the Republican National Committee. And John Jenkins, the president of Notre Dame, has tested positive, and he was seen shaking hands over at the ceremony as well. Mnuchin, as of Saturday, has tested negative, and this is based off a Saturday test. And obviously, over the next weeks, we will be very focused on getting new tests for individuals like Nancy Pelosi, Mike Pence, Mark Meadows, Steve Mnuchin, and of course, Joe Biden. If there's any good news, research has now concluded that mosquitoes apparently can't transmit COVID. However, cases were up again on Friday. We're just over 48,500 cases, and this means that just about every 2 seconds, there is an American who tests positive for COVID-19 in the United States. Also, Moderna says it will not seek FDA emergency use authorization for their vaccine, likely at least until March. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing. If you want 2 completely free stocks, use the link down below. Deposit $100, get 2 free stocks with Webull, and get your life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.